Next up is the Burrito Bowl, page 14. We're going to use blended garden rice instead of regular white rice, chicken broth, black beans, chili powder, salsa, and chicken. That looks pretty good. Now the recipe called for about 20 ounces of chicken. I use about 20 ounces of chicken, but the recipe said to cut it into 4 to 6 pieces. That's around 5 ounces a piece. But I cut this into easily half that size, right? So I've got about a dozen pieces in there. Let's see how the rest of this looks. So let's take a look at the chicken. Yeah, I cut the chicken a little small according to the recipe, so I made the chicken a little drier. But I was afraid to use those really big pieces that I wouldn't cook all the way. Yeah, a little dry on the chicken. That's all cooked fine. Got the salsa. So let's talk about how much power I need to make this meal. And there's still a bunch left. I ate a big chunk of it. It said it would make about 4 servings. But I gotta tell you what, even though I ate a lot, there must be another 4 servings in here. Ah, I dribbled on it. Okay, so take a look here. My battery bank is a 400 amp hour battery bank, and I use roughly 8%, because when I started, battery state of charge was 76%. By the time I was done, I was 68%. And the voltage was 13.1 volts DC. By the time I was done, I was down to 12.9. That's roughly 8% of a 400 amp hour battery bank, so it meant I needed 32 amp hours needed to cook this meal. And if you look at the amp hour draw, it was roughly 80 amps when it was just starting up, but once it really got going and it kicked on its fan as well, it jumped up to 100 amps. So when you do the power that was required to cook this, it started off at about 1050, right? By the time I was actually cooking, I was up to 1300 watts, which kind of checks because the Speedi, according to the literature, uses 1760 watts, which means when you figure it's a 120 volt AC system, it means you're using roughly 14.7 amps. And you figure a lot of our electrical outlets are probably around 15 amp outlets. So if you're using this, that's all you can use on that particular circuit if it's a 15 amp circuit. Now, 32 amp hours is what needed to cook this meal. If you have a lead acid battery or an AGM battery, and you only have 80 amp hours in that battery, you just went through about half that battery, which is where you want to stop, and don't deplete any more out of that battery, or you run the risk of starting to degrade the cells. So think about that when you use the Speedi to cook a meal. Make sure that you have an inverter that can support potentially up to 1760 watts. In this particular case, I only use 1300 watts. And that you have a battery bank that can take that much amp hours out of the battery. So some final thoughts. I have my solar panels on the roof, but they're down. And the sun was going down as well. So the bulk of my power usage is what was being used, but it was supplemented a little bit by some solar power. So all those numbers, just round them up, and that'd probably get you really close to what you can expect. Okay, so far as the meal, the bottom part with the rice and the beans, that cooked fine. The chicken, I'm nervous about having big chunks of chicken inside of here and whether or not it would cook all the way. So I kind of make them more of the strips of chicken instead of a big chunk of chicken breast. If I did a big chunks of chicken breast, if I did that, then it would probably not be as dry, right? But I run the risk of not cooking the chicken all the way. And I kind of like the size of the chicken that I was using, so I think the best option is keep cutting the chicken the way I've been doing. But instead of cooking it the whole way through, maybe the last minute or so, pull the chicken out and then let it finish cooking the rice and beans at the bottom. That's a recommendation.